My family demanded I host my golden child brother's wedding at my workshop after they disowned me. I refused, so they planned to ambush me with 200 guests. They never saw my biker rally coming. The world goes quiet when I work. Not silent, never silent, but quiet. The high-pitched whine of the TIG welder melts into a kind of meditation. The rhythmic clang of a hammer on steel becomes a heartbeat, and the abrasive hiss of the angle grinder is just the world breathing. On a good Sunday morning, with the Texas sun just starting to bake the dust outside my roll-up doors, that quiet is the closest thing I have to church. My sanctuary smelled of motor oil, hot metal, and leather, the holy trinity of my resurrection. I was laying a bead of weld along the spine of a custom hardtail frame, a river of molten silver that would hold a man's life together at 80 miles an hour. Precision, control, everything my old life lacked. My phone, which I usually kept buried under a pile of greasy rags, started vibrating on the workbench. The vibrations were angry, insistent, cutting through the calm. I lifted my welding mask, letting the sudden light sting my eyes, and sighed. Probably Sal, my business partner, wondering if I wanted to grab a beer later. I wiped my hands on a rag, leaving a streak of black grease, and picked up the phone. The name on the screen wasn't Sal. It was a name I hadn't seen in a decade, a ghost from a life I'd torched and left for dead. Eleanor. Not Mom. My mind refused to make that connection anymore. I let it vibrate a few more times, a petty little power play just for myself. Finally, I tapped the screen. Yeah. My voice was rough, rusted from disuse in any conversation that wasn't about gear ratios or paint codes. Asher? Darling, is that you? Her voice was exactly as I remembered it. A slow drizzle of southern honey, thick and cloying, designed to hide the poison underneath. It was the voice that could convince a saint to sin and a sinner to think he was saved. I know who it is. What do you want, Eleanor? I said, leaning against the workbench. The steel frame I'd been working on felt cool and solid against my back, a grounding force. Oh, always so direct, she tittered, a sound like tiny glass shards breaking. Can't a mother call her son after all this time? A decade isn't all this time, it's a statement. You made yours, I got the message. So again, what do you want? She sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation designed to convey immense suffering. It's your brother, Asher. Trevor. He's getting married to the most wonderful girl, Annabelle. Her father is a big deal in Dallas real estate. Very traditional, very respectable. The emphasis was not accidental. Respectable was the word my father, Edward, had used as a club to beat me with my entire life. I was not respectable. Trevor, the golden child with his finance degree and his corner office, was the very definition of it. Good for him, I said, my eyes drifting to the blueprint for a V-twin engine on the wall. Send him my regards. I was already moving to end the call. Wait, darling, that's why I'm calling, she purred, and I could feel the trap closing. We've decided to have the wedding at your lovely property. It's so big and rustic, so authentic. It'll be the perfect way to bring the whole family back together again. A fresh start. The wrench in my hand slipped and clattered to the concrete floor. Excuse me. Your father and I were just saying, it's time to let bygones be bygones. And since you have all that space, we thought, why not? It's perfect. We're thinking September 20th. I stared at the phone, at the name Eleanor on the screen. She wasn't just calling to inform me. She was calling to announce an invasion. An occupation. She thought after 10 years of leaving me for dead, she could just waltz back in and claim my land, my peace, my quiet as her own. She thought I was still the boy she'd thrown away. For a moment, I was speechless. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. My entire property, the house I'd built with my own 2 hands, the workshop that was the heart of my business, the acres of land that represented a decade of sweat and sacrifice, was being reduced to a party venue, a prop for their perfect family reunion. No, I said. The word was flat, hard, and final, like a steel door slamming shut. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. What did you say? Eleanor's honeyed tone had curdled, a hint of acid creeping in. I said no. No, this is my home, my business. It's not your event space. You can't have the wedding here. Asher, don't be selfish, she snapped, the mask of the doting mother slipping completely. This is for your brother. This is for the family. What family? I shot back, my voice rising. The family that told me I was a disgrace? The one that hasn't called, texted, or even sent a goddamn Christmas card in 10 years. That family. I heard a shuffling sound, then a new voice, one that chilled my blood even in the Texas heat. It was my father, Edward. His tone was as cold and sharp as a razor. Let me talk to him, Eleanor. A pause. Asher, you're embarrassing your mother. It wasn't a greeting. It was an immediate assertion of authority, an attempt to put me back in my place as the rebellious child. She's embarrassing herself. I retorted, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. Listen to me, and listen closely, he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. The invitations have been printed, 200 of them, with your address. Annabelle's father, a man you would do well to impress, is expecting a beautiful, rustic wedding at his future son-in-law's brother's estate. You will not make a fool of this family. You will not make a fool of me. The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. This wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by the weight of public shame. They thought they still knew me, the boy who would do anything to avoid a scene, who would swallow his pride to keep the peace. They were counting on it. This is my property, Edward, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. If you set foot on it without my permission, it's called trespassing. He actually laughed. A short, ugly barking sound. Don't be a child. You think you can turn away 200 guests, including some of the most influential people in Dallas? You care too much about that little business of yours, about your reputation. You wouldn't dare. We're having this wedding at your place, whether you like it or not. We'll see you on September 20th. Clean the place up a bit. It looks dreadful in the photos Trevor showed us. The line went dead. I stood there, the silence of the workshop rushing back in, louder than before. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a volcanic rage that had been dormant for a decade. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had redrawn the entire map of our conflict, staging their final battle on my home turf. My phone buzzed again. A text message. It was from Trevor. Heard you're being difficult. Just go with it. Can't wait to show my future father-in-law your little grease monkey den. Don't mess this up for me. My grease monkey den. His deal. My life, a stepping stone for his. That was the last straw. The rage solidified into something cold, hard, and sharp. A plan. The echo of my father's ultimatum and Trevor's condescending text sent me reeling back in time. The smell of oil and steel in my workshop suddenly felt like the smell of my teenage bedroom, a space I'd converted into a makeshift lab of motorcycle parts and dreams. I walked over to my workbench, my hand tracing the scar on the wood where I'd dropped a hot engine block years ago. The past wasn't dead. It was just lying in wait, ready to ambush you. I was 17. I'd spent an entire summer rebuilding a rusted-out 1978 Harley-Davidson shovelhead engine I'd bought with money from mowing lawns. I'd taken it apart piece by piece, cleaned every piston, polished every valve, and reassembled it with a reverence most kids my age reserve for video games. The day I finally got it to turn over, the guttural, earth-shaking roar was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of creation. I ran into the house, my hands black with grease, my face beaming. Dad, you got to see this. It works. My father, Edward, was in his leather armchair, reading the Wall Street Journal. He didn't look up. Trevor, home from his first year of college for pre-law, was lounging on the sofa, smirking. Edward, he's talking to you, my mother prompted gently. My father slowly lowered his newspaper, his eyes scanning my grease-stained t-shirt and jeans with open disgust. See what, Asher? That you've turned your room into a junkyard. No, the engine. I rebuilt it. It's running. He followed me out to the garage, his expensive loafers crunching on the stray nuts and bolts on the floor. I pointed to the magnificent, throbbing heart of steel on the engine stand. He stared at it for a long moment. I waited, my chest tight, with a desperate need for a single word of approval. This, he finally said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, is a dead-end hobby for the lower class. You're covered in filth. You smell like a gas station. Your brother is learning about torts and contracts, and you're playing with scrap metal. Is this what you want to be? A grease monkey? Trevor snickered from the doorway. Leave him alone, Dad. Someone's got to fix our cars when they break down. The humiliation was a physical burn. That was the day I realized I wasn't just a disappointment. I was a different species to him. I was a failure in his narrative of success. The final explosion came a year later. I'd been accepted to a prestigious technical institute for automotive and motorcycle engineering. I'd also been accepted to the state university for a general business degree, his choice. The confrontation happened in his study, a room filled with law books and pictures of Trevor. I'm not going, I told him, holding the acceptance letter from the Tech Institute. I'm going here. This is what I love. His face, which had been impassive, turned a dark, dangerous shade of red. You will go to the state university. You will get a respectable degree. No son of mine will be a blue-collar disgrace. It's my life. I shouted, the words tearing out of me. Why do you hate everything I care about? Because what you care about is worthless, he roared, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. It's dirt and noise and a dead end. You have a choice, Asher. You either enroll in the business program by the end of this week, or you get out of this house. We will not support a failure. I stared at him, and my mother standing silently by his side, her face a mask of pained compliance. I looked at the photos of Trevor on the wall, smiling in his debate team jacket. I was an error in their perfect equation. Fine, I whisper, my heart breaking. That night, I packed a duffel bag. My father stood on the porch as I walked to my beat-up truck. He didn't say goodbye. He just handed me a small seal box. Your mother wanted you to have these. Then he turned and went back inside, closing the door on my childhood. The memory was so vivid it made the air in my workshop feel thin. They thought I was still that 18-year-old kid with nothing but a truck and a broken heart. They had no idea who I'd become in the fire they'd thrown me into. My hands were still trembling, but the rage was starting to cool, crystallizing into something sharp and focused. I walked over to the industrial sink in the corner of the workshop and scrubbed the grease from my hands, watching the black swirls disappear down the drain. I needed a clear head. I needed a plan. And I needed Sal. I dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. Yo, don't tell me you finished the fuel tank for the 69 chopper already. You're making me look bad. Forget the chopper, I said, my voice tight. I need you to come over to the shop. Now. The lack of banter in my tone must have alerted him. What's wrong? You sound like someone just keyed your bike. Worse. My family made contact. There was a pause, then a low whistle. The holy trinity of nope? Your dad, Mom, and Brother Golden Balls? After 10 years? This can't be good. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, Sal's mud-splattered Ford F-150 roared up to the workshop. Sal was the opposite of me in many ways. While I was quiet and methodical, he was loud, impulsive, and had the cheerful bluntness of the ex-Army mechanic he was. We'd met at a bike show years ago and bonded over a shared hatred for cheap parts and pretentious riders. He was the only person who knew the whole ugly story of my family. He was my business partner, my best friend, and the brother I'd chosen. He stepped into the shop, took one look at my face, and his grin faded. Damn, Ash. It's bad, huh? I handed him my phone and let him read Trevor's text message. His face darkened. Grease Monkey Den? That little trust fund parasite. What's this about? I recounted the phone call, the wedding announcement, the demand to use my property, and my father's ultimatum. As I spoke, Sal's expression shifted from disbelief to pure, unadulterated fury. Are you kidding me? He exploded, pacing the concrete floor. They kick you out, leave you with nothing, and now they want to throw a party in the palace you built from their garbage? Hell no. Absolutely not. They've already printed the invitations, Sal. They're planning on just showing up with 200 guests. Let him, he growled. I've still got some friends on the local sheriff's department. We can have a fleet of squad cars here to greet them. It's not that simple, I said, shaking my head. My father is a master of public perception. He'd spin it to make me look like the monster. He mentioned Annabelle's father, some big shot. This is about appearances. Sal stopped pacing and looked at me, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. Oh, it's about appearances, is it? Good. That's a game two can play. He tapped a finger against his temple. This is above my pay grade, my friend. This requires a specialist. This has my Uncle Ben's brand of creative justice written all over it. Uncle Ben. Benicio Ben Garza. Sal's uncle was a retired district court judge, a local legend known for his sharp legal mind and his absolute intolerance for bullies. He'd taken a shine to me years ago, respecting, as he put it, a man who builds things with his own hands. You think he'd help? I asked. Help? He'll revel in it. This is exactly the kind of righteous fight he loves now that he's not on the bench. Sal's grin widened. And you know what we should lead with? The real dirt. The thing that's worse than them being colossal assholes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew exactly what he meant. The inheritance. Bingo, Sal said, clapping me on the shoulder. Let's go dig up that treasure chest of betrayal you've got buried in the attic. It's time to load the cannons. The attic of my small, self-built house wasn't a place of forgotten memories. It was a tomb. It held the few remnants of a life I had intentionally buried. Following Sal up the creaking, pull-down stairs felt like a descent into my own past. The air was thick with the smell of old wood, dust, and time. You sure you know where it is? Sal asked, his voice muffled in the enclosed space. He played the beam of his flashlight across stacks of old motorcycle magazines and boxes of spare parts. It's here, I said, my voice quiet. I've only ever opened it once. I pointed toward a dark corner. Tucked away behind a vintage Triumph gas tank was an old military-style footlocker. It was the box my father had handed me on the night he kicked me out. I had driven to a motel that night, and in the sterile silence of the room, I'd pried it open. It didn't contain photos or keepsakes. It contained papers, financial documents, letters, things an 18-year-old couldn't fully comprehend but knew were important. I'd looked at them, felt a confusing mix of anger and grief, and then locked them away, deciding to build a future instead of dwelling on a painful past. We dragged the heavy box into the center of the attic floor. The metal clasps were rusted shut. Sal produced a flathead screwdriver from his pocket. He was never without a tool, and with a sharp crack, the lock gave way. The smell of aging paper filled the air. I reached inside, my hands trembling slightly, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I spread the contents across the dusty floorboards, the flashlight beam illuminating the words that had changed my life. Sal knelt beside me, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a heavy silence. Holy hell, he whispered. There it was in black and white. A formal letter from a law firm, dated 10 years ago. It was from the estate lawyer of my godmother, a kind woman who had passed away when I was 17. It detailed a trust she had left for me, a sum of nearly $250,000, explicitly designated for my education and future endeavors. Beside it were the other documents. Bank statements, a copy of a legal filing my father had made, petitioning the court to become the sole trustee of the fund, citing my minority and lack of financial acumen. And then the final damning piece of paper, a transaction record dated just 2 months before my 18th birthday, showing the entire sum, $247, $850.34 to be exact, being transferred from the trust into a private investment account held solely in my father's name. He didn't just kick you out, Sal said, his voice shaking with a quiet fury I'd never heard from him before. He robbed you blind. He paid for Trevor's fancy college and his first condo with your money. The money your godmother left you. I just stare at the papers, the decade-old betrayal feeling as fresh and raw as an open wound. All those years I'd struggled, working 2 jobs, sleeping in my truck some nights, saving every penny to buy my first set of tools, to make the down payment on this land, all while he was sitting on a fortune that was rightfully mine. There's more, I said, my voice hoarse. I pulled out another, smaller envelope from the bottom of the footlocker. It was a handwritten letter from my mother. I'd only ever skimmed it before, the flowery language and self-pity too much to bear at the time. I read it aloud, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My dearest Asher, your father and I have decided this is for the best. A young man like you, with your inclinations, could not be trusted with such a large sum. You would only waste it on your noisy, dirty hobbies. We have moved it to a safe place, where it can be used for the good of the entire family. Trevor's education is so important, and this will ensure he has the best opportunities. One day, when you're more mature, you will understand that this was an act of love. Sal swore a long, vicious string of curses. An act of love? That's not a letter. That's a confession. They didn't just steal your money, Ash. They wrote down why they did it. They justified it. He looked from the letter to me, his eyes blazing. Uncle Ben isn't just going to love this. He's going to build a legal bonfire and throw your whole damn family on it. Judge Benicio Garza's home office was the polar opposite of my workshop, where I had steel and grease. He had mahogany and old books. The air smelled of leather and pipe tobacco, a scent of quiet authority and considered thought. He sat behind a large, imposing desk, his face a roadmap of stern lines that could break into a surprisingly warm smile. At the moment, there was no smile. He peered at the documents spread across his desk through a pair of half-moon glasses, his silence more intimidating than any shouting could ever be. Sal and I sat opposite him, waiting for the verdict. Finally, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Well," he said, his voice a low rumble. "In 30 years on the bench, I saw a lot of ugliness. But there's a special circle in hell for people who steal from their own children. So we have a case." I asked, leaning forward. "A case?" He let out a short, dry laugh. "Son, you have a hand grenade. This letter from your mother is what we in the legal profession call a smoking gun, or in this case, a smoking vault." He tapped the bank statements. "The problem, as you might suspect, is the statute of limitations on the criminal charge of theft. It's likely expired." My heart sank. "So there's nothing I can do?" I didn't say that. A flicker of a smile finally appeared. "The criminal statute may be gone, but the statute for civil fraud, especially when it involves a fiduciary duty, like a parent acting as a trustee for a child, is a different animal. It can often be argued that the clock doesn't start ticking until the moment you discovered the fraud. We can make a very strong case that you, an 18-year-old kid in distress, couldn't have possibly understood these documents until now, with proper counsel." Sal grinned. "So we can sue them." "We can sue them into the next century," Ben confirmed. "For the original amount, plus 10 years of interest, plus punitive damages for the fraudulent conduct. We'll file it, but we'll have it sealed. They won't see it coming until we want them to." I felt a surge of adrenaline, of power. It was the first time in this whole affair I hadn't felt on the defensive. "But just suing them isn't enough," I said, thinking of my father's threat. "He's right about one thing. They're counting on me not wanting to cause a scene. They're planning to ambush me." Ben leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Indeed. So you don't just build a legal wall to keep them out. You have to turn their own weapon, public appearance, against them. They want to show up to a wedding, expecting a quiet, rustic backdrop for their traditional family values display." His eyes twinkled with a familiar, mischievous light. "So, you don't give them a quiet backdrop. You give them the opposite. An idea, wild and beautiful and terrible, began to form in my mind. It was born of the noise, the rebellion, the very culture they despised. They hate my business," I said, thinking aloud. "They hate the noise, the leather, the entire biker world. They think it's low class." "Exactly," Ben said, nodding. "So what if, on September 20th, when they show up with their 200 guests in pastel dresses and seersucker suits, they don't find an empty field waiting for their caterer?" I looked from Ben to Sal, my own grin starting to match theirs. "What if they walk into the middle of a massive, weekend-long biker rally and charity fundraiser for veterans?" Sal started to laugh, a deep, booming sound that filled the mahogany-lined office. "Oh, that is dirty. That is beautiful." "The Freedom Ride," I said, the name coming to me instantly. Loud pipes, rock music, 1,000 motorcycles, and a giant banner at the front gate that says, "All proceeds go to veteran support programs." Ben clapped his hands together, the sound like a gavel. "Brilliant. Utterly, legally, beautifully brilliant. They can't argue with a charity event, especially one for veterans. They look like monsters. We can get the permits expedited. We'll make it airtight." He pointed a finger at me. "They want to commandeer your property? Fine. Let's make sure they don't recognize the place when they get there. The weeks leading up to September 20th were a masterclass in psychological warfare, waged primarily through my inbox and voicemail. My family, completely oblivious to the storm I was brewing, began their escalation campaign, convinced they could break me through sheer, relentless pressure. It started with the emails from Eleanor. The subject line was always something cloying, like thinking of you or sweet memories. The content was a series of old family photos, carefully curated to inflict maximum guilt. That was at age 6, a gap-toothed smile standing between my parents. There was Trevor and me at Christmas, him holding a new bicycle, me holding a set of wrenches I'd begged for. Each photo was a reminder of a time before I had become, in their eyes, a problem. The subtext was clear. This is the family you're betraying. This is the happiness you're destroying. I forwarded every single one to Uncle Ben with a note, more for the emotional distress file. Then came the next phase of their attack. I was under the chassis of a 54 Panhead when a sleek, white BMW I didn't recognize pulled up to the workshop. A young woman got out. She was impeccably dressed, looking wildly out of place against the backdrop of welding tanks and engine blocks. "Asher," she asked, her voice bright and confident. I slid out from under the bike and stood up, wiping my hands. "Can I help you?" "It's me, Melanie." "Melanie Rylance?" Our fathers are in the same investment club. We met years ago at the country club Christmas party. The memory was vague, but the purpose of her visit was crystal clear. A honey trap. She was beautiful, charming, and a perfect emissary from the world they wanted me to belong to. "I heard you were back in town and just had to drop by," she said, her eyes doing a practice sweep of my workshop. "Wow, this is quite the setup you have here. I know they sent you, Melanie," I said, my voice polite but firm, cutting through the pretense. "Tell my father his tactics are as rusty as his 72 shovel head. I'm not interested. It was good of you to try, though." Her smile faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. She wasn't used to being dismissed. She left without another word. The attempt was so transparent, it was almost insulting. The final, and most audacious, move came a week later. I received a notification from my bank. A charge for $50,000 from Elite Catering and Events. My blood ran cold. I called the bank, my heart pounding. The customer service representative explained the charge was made against a joint credit card I held with my father. A card I hadn't used since I was a teenager, one I'd completely forgotten about. He was still the primary account holder and had authorized the charge, the full, non-refundable deposit for Trevor's wedding catering. I felt a wave of nausea. They were trying to trap me financially, to make me an unwilling investor in my own invasion. Once my money was in, they reasoned, I'd have no choice but to fold. Sal found me sitting in my office, staring at the bank statement on my computer screen. "What is it now?" he asked. I just pointed at the screen. He read it, and a string of curses escaped his lips. "That son of a bitch. That is next-level evil, Ash. Classic move," I said, my voice hollow. "Make you complicit in your own downfall." Just then my phone buzzed. It was an Instagram notification. Trevor had posted a new photo. It was a picture of my workshop, clearly taken from the road, with the sun setting behind it. The caption read, "Pre-wedding recon at my little bro's place. It's got good bones. Can't wait to have it professionally cleaned up and get some real class in here for the big day. Sorry, sis-in-law, for the rustic vibe. We'll make it respectable. Hashtag family first, hashtag wedding prep, hashtag making it right." The comments were already rolling in from his sycophantic friends. Showing him how it's done, Trev. Nothing like a strong family to fix a black sheep. That was it. They weren't just pushing me. They were publicly rewriting my story, painting me as their reclamation project. I forwarded everything, the bank statement, the screenshot of the post, to Uncle Ben. Then I pulled up the official website for the Freedom Ride Charity Bash. The clock was ticking. They thought they were building a pressure cooker to break me. They had no idea I was using that same pressure to fuel a bomb. The fraudulent catering charge and Trevor's public post were the final declarations of war. There was no more room for doubt, no sliver of hope for a peaceful resolution. My family had made it clear they saw me not as a person, but as an obstacle to be overcome, an asset to be seized. The time for defense was over. It was time to go on the offensive. The next 2 weeks were a blur of controlled, purposeful action. My workshop, usually a place of solitary creation, became a command center. While I continued to work on my bike commissions during the day, my nights were spent with Sal and on the phone with Uncle Ben, meticulously putting the pieces of our counteroffensive into place. First, the legal armor. Uncle Ben, with the ruthless efficiency of a seasoned judge, drafted a series of documents. We filed for the event permits for the Freedom Ride Charity Bash, citing the date, expected attendance. We put it at a conservative 500 people. And purpose. With a few calls from a retired judge to the county clerk's office, the permits were expedited and approved in record time. They were ironclad. Next, we hired a professional security team, a company run by a former Marine Sal had served with. They weren't just event staff. They were specialists in de-escalation and crowd control. I walked the property line with their lead, a man built like a vending machine named Hank, pointing out the single entry point and the best places to establish checkpoints. He just nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Don't you worry, Mr. Hall. Nobody gets past my gate unless they're on the list." Then came the heart of the operation, the rally itself. I called Stitches, the president of the largest veterans motorcycle club in the state. I'd built a custom bike for him a few years back, and we'd earned a mutual respect. Stitches was a mountain of a man with a graying beard and arms covered in tattoos that told the story of his life, from Vietnam to the founding of his club. I laid out the situation plainly. I didn't have to embellish. They want to take my home for a party, Stitches, so I'd rather give it to my friends for a good cause. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, "My boys and I hate 3 things, Asher: bike thieves, people who disrespect the flag, and bullies. It sounds to me like your family hits 2 out of 3. We're in. We'll bring the whole damn chapter. We'll make it the biggest charity run this county's ever seen." The final piece of the puzzle was the civil suit. Ben's paralegal prepared the filing, a thick stack of papers detailing the fraudulent transfer of the $250,000, attaching copies of the bank statements and my mother's incriminating letter. It demanded full repayment with interest and punitive damages. "We'll file it with the court the day before the event," Ben explained over the phone. "It will be officially on the docket. The process server will be on standby. We serve them the moment they cause a scene. It's the checkmate move." The night before the rally, Sal and I stood in the quiet workshop, the air humming with anticipation. Dozens of vendor tents were already set up in the far field. The stage for the band was built. The security team was in place. "Last chance to back out," Sal said quietly, though there was no question in his eyes. I thought of the 17-year-old kid in the garage, covered in grease, begging for a single word of approval. I thought of the 18-year-old, watching his father close the door on him. I thought of the fraudulent charge on my bank statement and the public mockery on Instagram. "They loaded this gun," I said, picking up a wrench and feeling its solid weight in my hand. "They aimed it at my head. The only thing I'm doing is turning it around." September 20th dawned hot and cloudless. A perfect day for a wedding. Or, in my case, a perfect day for an uprising. By 10 a.m., the quiet hum of my property had been replaced by a symphony of controlled chaos. The deep, staggered rumble of hundreds of V-twin engines vibrated through the ground as motorcycle clubs from all over the state arrived in disciplined formations. The air, usually clean and smelling of hay, was now thick with the glorious scent of grilling meat from 3 different barbecue food trucks and the sound of classic rock blasting from a professional concert stage. Rainbows of custom paint jobs, candy apple red, metallic blue, gleaming chrome, lined the fields where my family had envisioned pristine white tents and floral arrangements. Instead of valets in neat uniforms, there were burly bikers in leather vests covered in patches, directing traffic with practiced ease. At the main gate, a massive banner, professionally printed, fluttered in the breeze. "First Annual Freedom Ride Charity Bash, all proceeds to support our nation's veterans." I stood on the porch of my house, sipping a cup of coffee, feeling a strange, electric calm. Sal was up on the roof of the workshop with a pair of binoculars, acting as our lookout. The security team, led by Hank, was stationed at the gate, their presence professional and absolute. Everything was in place. At exactly 2 p.m., right on schedule, Sal's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie I had. "We've got incoming. Convoy of shiny European cars. Looks like the circus is officially coming to town." I took a final sip of coffee and walked down my driveway to the gate, positioning myself just behind Hank. The music seemed to swell, as if sensing the impending drama. The first car, a gleaming black Mercedes, pulled up to the gate abruptly. My mother, Eleanor, practically burst out of the passenger side, dressed in a powder blue dress and a hat that probably cost more than my first set of tools. Her smile was brittle and bright, but it shattered the moment she took in the scene. The banner, the bikes, the music, the crowd of people in jeans and leather. Her face contorted in a mask of pure horror. "Asher!" she shrieked, her voice barely audible over a Lynyrd Skynyrd guitar solo. "What is the meaning of this?" I gave her a serene smile. "Welcome to the Freedom Ride Charity Bash, Eleanor. Tickets are $50. All proceeds go to vets. Can I help you?" More cars pulled up behind them, a procession of BMWs, Audis, and a pristine vintage Rolls-Royce. My father got out of the Mercedes, his face thunderous. Then came Trevor and his bride, Annabelle, who looked resplendent in a massive white gown. They were followed by a small army of people in their wedding finery, their expressions shifting from festive to utterly bewildered. "What is this garbage?" Trevor stormed forward, his face flushed. "The caterers are right behind us. This is my wedding." "No," I said, my voice calm and carrying as I nodded to Hank. "This is a legally permitted private charity event on my property." I looked past Trevor at the stunned faces of his guests. "And you're all trespassing." Annabelle, the bride, shoved past Trevor, her white dress dragging in the dust. "You can't do this to us. We have contracts." "Actually," I said, holding up my phone, "I have contracts with the bands, the food trucks, and the security team. What you have are fraudulent documents and a very, very confused caterer who is about to find out he was hired under false pretenses." My father jabbed a finger at me, his face turning a blotchy red. "I will destroy you for this. I will sue you for everything you have." "Get in line," I said, just as Stitches, the biker club president, walked up beside me. He was holding a donation bucket and looked at my father with a placid, unnerving calm. "Is there a problem here, folks?" Stitches asked, his voice a low rumble. "Wouldn't want to disrupt a peaceful event for our nation's heroes, would we?" My family and their 200 guests were frozen, caught between a rock and a hard place. Behind them was the road. In front of them was a wall of leather, chrome, and righteous indignation. The show was about to begin. The standoff at the gate was a tableau of colliding worlds. On one side, the wedding party stood in the dust, their expensive silks and tailored suits looking absurd against the backdrop of roaring engines and rock and roll. On the other side stood me, Hank's security team, and a growing, curious crowd of bikers who smelled a good story. "Move these people out of the way," Annabelle the bride screeched, her voice a shrill siren of entitlement. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Stitches. "This is my special day." Suddenly, a white van with elite catering and events on the side pulled up behind the convoy. A confused-looking man in a chef's coat got out. Is this the Hall wedding? We've got a seafood tower on ice here." "That would be them," I said, pointing to my bewildered family. "But you might want to check who actually signed your contract, because it wasn't me. And my property is booked for the day." The caterer's face went pale as he started to put the pieces together. The chaos was escalating, and my father knew he was losing control. "You're a bigger fool than I ever imagined," Edward snarled at me, his voice low and venomous. "Did you really think this would work? I have powerful friends, Asher." "I'm sure you do," I replied calmly. "But I have permits." Just then, another vehicle arrived, this one a white van with a local news station's logo on the side. A reporter and a cameraman hopped out, their equipment already rolling. "And I also have the press. I invited them to cover this wonderful charity event. Smile for the cameras, Dad. I hear your conservative backers love viral videos." My father's face went from red to ashen. He saw his carefully constructed world of respectability crumbling on live television. But Annabelle was not as calculating. Fueled by rage and champagne, she lunged forward, trying to tear down the charity banner at the gate. In the process, she shoved a woman, one of the charity volunteers, a Gold Star wife, who stumbled backward. Assault! Sal yelled from his perch on the roof, his voice booming over the PA system he had access to. We all saw that. Good thing we have police on site for traffic control. As if on cue, two sheriff's deputies who had been managing traffic at the main road walked over, their expressions serious. Annabelle's meltdown went into overdrive. This is my wedding. My father is a very important man. You can't do this. Her father, a portly man with a face like a clenched fist, finally stepped forward. He wasn't looking at me or the deputies. He was looking at Trevor, his expression one of utter disgust. He was the key investor Trevor had been courting for months. "Is this your family, Trevor?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "This circus? This is the stability you promised me?" Trevor stammered, his face a mask of panic. "Mr. Rylance, I can explain." "Don't bother." Rylance cut him off. He turned to his daughter. "Annabelle, we're leaving. The wedding is off. The deal is off. I will not have my family associated with this trash." He spat the last word, looking from my father to the crowd of bikers, making no distinction. Annabelle let out a wail that could curdle milk and, in a fit of pique, ripped off her veil and threw it at Trevor's face. "You ruined everything," she screamed, before storming back to her father's car. The entire scene was being captured by the news camera. It was a spectacular public implosion. It was in that perfect moment of ruin, as my father stood there, checkmated and humiliated, that a calm, professional-looking man stepped through the crowd. He was holding a crisp legal envelope. He walked directly up to my father. "Edward Hall," the man asked politely. My father, dazed, just nodded. "You've been served." The man handed him the envelope and walked away. I let the moment hang in the air for a few seconds before delivering the final blow. "You should check your email, Dad," I said, my voice clear and loud enough for the camera's microphone to pick up. "It's about the $250,000 you stole from me 10 years ago. I've included interest." The color drained completely from his face. He finally understood. This wasn't just a ruin party. It was a demolition. The aftermath was swifter and more brutal than I could have ever imagined. The news report aired that evening, and the clips went viral overnight. The headline was sensational and irresistible. "Country Club Wedding Crashes Veterans Charity Biker Rally. $1 million deal implodes." The video of Annabelle shoving the Gold Star wife and my father being served with a lawsuit became a meme before sunrise. The comments section was a digital battlefield. My family was crucified. Trevor's pathetic attempt to mock my workshop on Instagram was unearthed and plastered everywhere, painting him as the arrogant architect of his own demise. By Monday morning, the fallout was catastrophic for them. As Uncle Ben had predicted, Trevor's remaining conservative investors, terrified of being associated with the scandal, pulled out. His company, which was already on shaky ground, was effectively gutted. My father was asked to take a leave of absence from the board of his prestigious country club. My mother's social circle evaporated, her phone suddenly silent. They had built their entire world on the flimsy foundation of public perception, and I had just detonated the bedrock. On Tuesday, the call came, not from my family, but from a slick, panicked lawyer representing them. "Mr. Hall," he began, his voice strained. "My clients are keen to resolve this matter privately." "Are they?" I said, leaning back in my office chair, the familiar hum of my workshop a comforting presence. "That ship has sailed, sunk, and is now a tourist attraction on the ocean floor. But I'll tell you what, set up a video conference. All of them. You, my father, my mother, and my brother. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. And they should know my lawyer, Judge Garza, will be present." The next morning, their faces popped up on my laptop screen. They looked haggard, defeated. My father's face was a mask of cold fury. My mother's was tear-stained and puffy. And Trevor looked like a ghost, hollowed out and lost. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Uncle Ben started, his voice commanding even through the speakers. My client is prepared to offer terms to settle the civil suit for fraud, embezzlement, and emotional distress. You can't dictate terms to us, my father blustered, his old arrogance trying to find purchase. Edward, shut up, their own lawyer hissed, his eyes wide with alarm. I held up a hand. I'm dictating, I said simply. Here are my terms. They are non-negotiable. First, full and complete repayment of the stolen $250,000, plus 10 years of compound interest, calculated by a forensic accountant of my choosing. The total comes to just over $480,000. Trevor made a choking sound. Second, I continued, ignoring him. A formal, written public apology. It will be drafted by my lawyer and posted on all of your social media accounts, and it will remain there for no less than 1 year. It will admit to the theft of my inheritance and the attempted fraudulent takeover of my property. That will ruin us, my mother cried. You already did that, I said flatly. Third, a legally binding, permanent no-contact order. You will not call me, email me, text me, or show up at my home or my place of business ever again. Any violation will be met with immediate legal action. Or what? Trevor challenged, a flicker of his old self returning. You'll sue us again? Or I decline your settlement offer, I said, my voice dropping. And I take this to trial. And every document, every email, every one of Mother's manipulative letters becomes a matter of public record, dissected in open court. I'll let that sink in. Oh, and one more thing. I share my screen. On it was an email I'd received that morning. The subject line read, Story Inquiry, Netflix Documentary Division. It seems some people are very interested in the story of a family that disowns one son and steals his future to fund the other, I said softly. So you have a choice. You can sign the papers, pay back what you stole, and disappear from my life forever. Or you can become a multi-part docuseries. You have 24 hours to decide. I ended the call, leaving them to stare at the black screen, trapped in the prison of consequences they had built for themselves. They didn't take 24 hours. They took 3. Their lawyer called Uncle Ben back that afternoon, his voice devoid of any fight. They agreed to all terms. The signing took place a week later in a sterile conference room at Uncle Ben's old law firm. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a surrender. My father, mother, and brother sat across the long, polished table, their faces grim. They looked smaller, diminished, stripped of the arrogance that had been their armor for so long. I watched them sign paper after paper. The settlement agreement. The wire transfer authorization for nearly $500,000. The public apology, every word of which had been crafted by Ben to be clear, concise, and damning. The final document was the no-contact order. As my father signed it, his hand trembled. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for a moment, searching for a sign of the son he had thrown away. I met his gaze with nothing but cool, quiet finality. That son was gone. As we left the law office, their lawyer held him back. The apology needs to be posted now, he said, his voice weary. It's part of the agreement. I stood on the steps of the building as Trevor, his hands shaking, pulled out his phone and posted the apology. A moment later, my father did the same. The digital capitulation was complete. A few reporters, having been tipped off about the meeting, were waiting. They swarmed my family, who pushed through them silently and got into a car, a far cry from the confident convoy that had arrived at my home just weeks before. Then the cameras turned to me. Mr. Hall, can you comment on the settlement? Asher, what will you do now? I took a deep breath. I hadn't planned on this, but the words came to me, clear and certain. The settlement isn't a victory, I said, my voice steady. It's a correction. It's the return of something that was stolen from a kid who just wanted to build things. And that's exactly what I'm going to do with it. I looked directly into the main camera. I'm announcing the formation of the Asher Foundation. The entire sum of the repaid inheritance will be used to create a scholarship fund. It's for young people who want to pursue careers in the skilled trades, as mechanics, welders, builders, creators, but whose families don't support their dreams. It's for every kid who's ever been told their passion is worthless. The reporters started scribbling furiously. Later that day, back in the sanctuary of my workshop, Sal handed me a cold beer. The Asher Foundation, huh? I like the sound of that. Felt right, I said, taking a long drink. It tasted like freedom. I saw a single text message on my phone from an unknown number. It was from Trevor. A single sentence. I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without replying. His healing wasn't my responsibility anymore. The months that followed were a quiet revolution. The money arrived. The foundation was established. We received hundreds of applications, stories from kids all over the country who reminded me so much of myself. One afternoon, Sal brought me a tablet. He showed me a picture on social media. It was my father's house, the one I grew up in. It had a for sale sign out front. They'd had to sell it to cover the settlement and their legal fees. They were gone, faded into the obscurity they deserved. My life settled back into its rhythm, but it was a new kind of quiet. It wasn't the quiet of loneliness. It was the quiet of peace. The roar of a finished engine, the laughter of friends in my workshop, the respectful silence of a young scholarship recipient showing me their first project. The story wasn't about the family that rejected me anymore. It was about the community I had built, the found family of Sal, Uncle Ben, Stitches, and all the others who saw me for who I was. It was about the legacy I was forging, not from blood and obligation, but from steel, fire, and the choice to turn a great injustice into a source of hope for others. I picked up my welding mask, the familiar weight a comfort in my hands. Outside, the Texas sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land that was truly, finally mine. The game was over. I had won. But the real prize wasn't the money or the revenge. It was the quiet and the profound, unshakable knowledge that I was the one holding the pen now, writing a story that was entirely my own.